In recent weeks, scenes of hospitals in China overrun with masked people have made their rounds on social media, sparking worries of another pandemic. Beijing has since acknowledged a surge in cases of the flu-like human metapneumovirus, the HMPV. It's a bit of a tongue twister there, especially among children, and it attributed this to a seasonal spike. But HMPV is not like COVID-19, according to public health experts. They say that the virus has been around for decades, with almost every child being infected by their 5th birthday. However, in some very young children and people with weakened immune systems, it can cause more serious illness. So here's what we need to know, that HMPV is a virus that will lead to a mild upper respiratory tract infection, practically indistinguishable from flu for most people. It was first identified in the Netherlands in 2001. The virus spreads through direct contact between people or when someone touches surfaces contaminated with it. Symptoms for most people include cough, fever, and nasal congestion. The very young children, including children under the age of 2, are most vulnerable to the virus, along with those with weakened immune systems, including the elderly and those with advanced cancer, according to infectious disease experts. Now, if infected, a small but significant proportion among the immunocompromised will develop more severe disease where the lungs are affected, with wheezing, breathlessness, and symptoms of crop. I want to bring in now an epidemiologist and virologist, Dr. Akela Akela, beg your pardon. Thank you for joining us on The World Today. And interestingly, we're talking about another virus. We have just finally been cleared of COVID-19, and yet another virus infection in China. How is this different from the COVID-19 virus? How is HMPV any different from that, and how can doctors even tell the difference? It's still the same symptoms: flu, fever, cough.
Yeah, so thank you for having me, and Happy New Year, viewers and listeners. You have established a very robust background to this viral disease. Is it new? No, it is not new. You have established from your background that it was discovered in the Netherlands in 2001. And so it is not a new virus. The good news about this virus is that it is self-limiting. So even if you get infected, your immune system should be able to handle it. It does not have any viral treatment. It does not also have a vaccine. But why is it different from the COVID-19 virus that we all know about? One thing is that they belong to different viral families. And secondly, the rate of hospitalization, the rate of mortality or death differs. But they tend to have similarities among the COVID and also the human pneumoviruses. It's because they attack the upper respiratory tract system. And so they tend to present similar clinical signs and symptoms, except diagnosis has been established. They tend to have the same clinical presentation. And so they belong to different viral family. They also, their mortality, hospitalization rate differs. And I think this is also time for us to reject our public health system. We return back to the age before COVID, and then we abandon our non-pharmaceutical measures. So the virus and SARS also have similar mode of control in terms of control. They have similar. Once you employ the non-pharmaceutical measures, you take care of it. Wearing of face masks, washing of our hands, the use of hand sanitizers, and all what have you. These are quite key non-pharmaceutical measures to be able to handle this virus.
If we're saying that this virus is not new, I mean, rightly so, it appeared in the Netherlands in 2001. Is it possible that during the COVID-19, we could have also been treating the HMPV during the same time?
Absolutely, absolutely. Of course, yes. There are a lot of associated viral diseases that also appeared during COVID, and sometimes once we are treating one disease, you tend to treat the other. So it's most likely I was able to publish a paper on the SARS-CoV-2 with the normal influenza, looking at their clinical presentations. And there are also a lot of scholarly publications that also has established the co-infection of HPV with SARS-CoV-2. So it's possible that while we are treating COVID, we are also treating this, but it will be good for us to also establish the diagnosis, which is quite key. And then time has come for us to also see to how we should be able to, in advance, be able to procure the diagnostic assays and panels for this virus. So I agree with you. There are issues of co-infections and there are issues of comorbidity associated with COVID and HPV.
So is it also possible, doctor, that, with COVID, you treated for a period of time and then you began to feel better? As time passed, it became more easy. It became easier to deal with the COVID, the coronavirus, because it began to present like the common flu. So all of the other measures that you would take to cure and to feel better with the common flu, because there are viruses that have no cure, you can only manage the symptoms until they disappear. Is it also possible that the HMPV virus could stay longer in the human body than the COVID?
So understanding the virology of the virus is that it has a very short incubation period, other than COVID. The incubation period is between 2 to 5 days, while COVID is between 5 to 7 days. In terms of after treatment, whether you can have lasting antibodies being presented in the body, scholarly publication has also established that it is self-limiting. So the memory cells as a result of the viral infection tends to disappear much more faster. But there are also cases of reinfection, like in 2002 and 2005, there are cases of reinfection. And these are seasonals. They go with seasonal variability, they go with during winter period. And that's why in the UK, they tend to have more hospitalization rate at this time because of winter and other part of Europe. So in terms of understanding the longevity of the antibodies that have been established as a result of this infection, for COVID, it even stayed much more longer than this virus. So this virus is self-limiting. Once you're able to take care of the common signs and symptoms that appears, and you are immunocompetent, you can be able to handle it.
And it wouldn't leave, lasting effects just like COVID did with the COVID virus.
Not at all. And that's why I say that it has lesser hospitalization rate, even in terms of mortality, even in terms of severity, it is lesser compared to COVID. That does not underscore that we should not be able to put our surveillance search on understanding the dynamics of the disease. Of course, why was it picked in China is because they have a very active surveillance system. And so I'm calling on the Nigerian government to put more search on the point of entry, like our airports, like the land ports, and also the seaports. I was privileged to travel to Kigali sometimes in December, and also travel to Dakar within the same period of time in December. I saw how they digitalize their port authority system. You have a batch code that you scan with your phone, you put in your details of passport number. As you begin to walk, there is a camera that picks your temperature, a thermometer that picks your temperature that is being hacked. And virtually everything is done digitally. So when we return back to Nigeria, there was nothing like that. You hardly can see health or port authority officers being worked. So most of these things can be digitalized. I was in Kigali saying people observe distancing. People, we have to wash our hands. We are given free face masks at the airport. Most countries still maintain this because with globalization and international travel, it's just a twinkle of an eye within 24 hours because humans are carriers of this virus. They can export and import this virus. And so we need to actually strengthen our port health and to see to how we can strengthen surveillance system. But as it is today, we have 10 sentinel sites in the country that cut across primary and secondary healthcare facilities that monitors, influenza related viral diseases. I can categorically tell you that there is nothing associated with this virus in Nigeria at the moment. And that's why the press conference by NCDC established that the WHO has not yet declared it as a public health emergency, a global public health emergency. So I strongly believe we can as a country be able to manage this, learning from our experiences from COVID.
Yeah, and speaking of learning from experiences from COVID, will we also be requiring a vaccine in the near future for the HMPV?
Absolutely, and so we should be able to have vaccines cut across. I'm hoping that as scientists, upcoming scientists, emerging scientists, we should be able to have vaccine, one dose of vaccine that will cut across all diseases that has to do with respiratory tract, so that you don't take pneumonia vaccine different with COVID vaccine. But so I'm thinking that we should be able to in time to come. It also called that we should also think about local content development. As a country, we have huge human resources that we can beacon on. I'm also hoping and looking forward to the time that Ahmed Bola Tinubu will actually come up with a vaccine initiative that before his tenure elapses, we should be able to produce vaccines in country. The capacities are there. It's just to harness them for national growth. And I'm thinking that in that direction, based on his renewed hope agenda, we should be able to champion towards that direction.
Speaking of vaccines, I know that during the COVID pandemic, there were also efforts to develop vaccines here in Nigeria. I mean, there was a call for, scientists who had been working on any possible vaccine. Do we know if there was any progress made on that?
No progress. No progress. And that's why we needed a conversation post-COVID. We needed to actually have discussion. Our conversation post-COVID is geared towards economy. We need to have a holistic post-COVID conversation. And I thought maybe with the coming of COVID, there will be more funding into research and development in Nigeria. Because there are a lot of scientists that came up with rapid diagnostic kits for COVID, no support. There are a lot of people that came up with vaccine designs. Our research group, I'm part of a research group that came up with a vaccine design for that. So no sponsorship. I'm looking forward to a time that we need to be deliberate about research and development, and we need to shut down our border and consume what we produce. So in terms of biologics, in terms of diagnostics, we should be able to produce in-house. And those should be the 21st century conversation, because 21st century is about knowledge-driven economy. It is about translating knowledge into economy. And we cannot be able to, as a country, with our population and at our birth rate, be importing vaccines. We have been the sole producers of yellow fever vaccines in the early 90s. We lost it in 1991, when we are producing yellow fever vaccine for the West African region. And I think that we need to be deliberate, just like the way we revive the Wari refineries and the Port Harcourt refineries. It will be good for us to set up and revive our vaccine producing capability as a nation, since we have gotten the WHO, pass to be able to see to how we can think around local production of vaccines, even if it is in fill and finishing. We may not design it here, but to fill and finish, we should be able to do that. And I'm thinking that in the nearest future, it has to be PPP, public-private partnership-driven framework in terms of vaccine development. Government needs to create an enabling environment for biotechnology companies to come into the country and to actually produce vaccines. I'm hoping that in our generation, this will happen.
Yes, and I'm hoping as well that it also happens and that I'm able to report it and you're able to be here to discuss it with us when it happens. We've been talking about the adults, and I realize we haven't mentioned, how this virus affects children. According to one scientist in China, the very young, including children under the age of 2, are the most vulnerable to the virus, along with those with weakened immune systems, including the elderly and those with advanced cancer. What would be the mode of care for these ones should they come across the HMPV virus?
I've also read a lot of literatures associated with this virus. The virus is basically a virus that affects children, just like the way you have established, and also adults, people that are immunocompromised. In managing this, you manage the symptoms because it comes with a lot of dehydration where you need to rehydrate. It comes with the issue of fever where you need to treat the symptoms of fever and all what have you. So it is a virus that can be managed, and it has been managed over time. But the issue is that because it is affecting the younger population, the young population, because of their immune system growth, their immune system is not well developed like that of the adult, and also the older population because of their weakened immune system. And so it will be good for us to have a high suspicious index in terms of identifying these signs and symptoms and also managing them on time. This brings about advocacy. This brings about training of health workers that are managing basically children, the pediatrics. So it's a whole lot. And I think that a lot is being required from NCDC to see that we need to set up framework strategic plans,
Right.
treatment guidelines for virtually all diseases that are emerging and re-emerging, so that once we see this thing, we should be able to activate it. I'm calling on the federal government that we must not necessarily wait for WHO to declare this as a global disease or public health emergencies. We should be able to set up, activate our EOC, Emergency Operational Centers, in key areas like our port authorities, and to be able to see to how we can be able to procure testing kits for these viruses, and then be able to see to how we can develop treatment protocols on time so that we don't wait, just like the way we waited for COVID for long, and then it took us unaware. So all these things has to be put in place, and then we need strategic communications. Authorities, agencies need to actually come up and to talk to Nigerians on this. We need the National Orientation Agency to, in terms of, tell us what you are doing now. That's what we need to also, other agencies need to also embark on strategic advocacies and communications. And I think that with this, we are good to go, having learned our lessons from COVID and Ebola.
Dr. Shekhar, as we round up, with the Nigerian public, when you mention viruses and you mention diseases, COVID, monkeypox, and all the other ones, there's a lot of fear in society about, how people should relate to other people. So are there any words that you have for the Nigerian the populace to quell fear? Is there any reason to be a bit more cautious because of the HMPV?
Yeah, it's not a disease that kills like COVID. It is a self-limiting disease. Once you eat well, you drink well, your immune system should be able to handle the virus. And so it is not like COVID that you need to lose your test. You need to struggle to gasp for air. You have difficulty in breathing. This is a disease that is self-limiting. With proper management and attention of the clinical signs and symptoms, it can be managed well. So it is not a disease for us to panic. I think as a country, we have the capacity to be able to handle it And so we can go on with our normal routine activities. There will be no lockdown, and then we'll go on with our normal activities.
Dr. Ishaku Akela, epidemiologist and virologist, thank you so much for your extensive analysis on the HMPV virus.
Thank you so much for having me, and have a rewarding evening, viewers.
And you too, and a happy new year to you as well.